My name is Ann Purvis, and I'm one of the leaders of the Toronto Field Naturalist Juniors program. We meet weekly on Wednesdays from 5 to 6, and we have completed 7 weeks of a 10-week program this spring. We begin each session by looking at photos that our participants have sent in of things that they have witnessed in nature that week. This allows us to follow what is going on in nature week by week in Toronto right around us. Now, Evelyn and Anna sent in this photo of a fern unfurling, and I challenged everyone what shape this is, and people accurately realized it's a spiral. Spirals are actually quite common in nature when we think of there's certain storms that are spiral shaped, such as hurricanes and tornadoes. The galaxy itself is spiral shaped. And right now, at this time of year, lilies, the monocots coming out of the ground, come out in a spiral. If you look at them from above, you can see a spiral. So spirals are very common. Also, we have many people who enjoy snails in this program. Snails have a spiral-shaped shell. So this shape is common in nature, and it's fascinating to wonder why and to have a look for spirals. So Evelyn and Anna visited obviously a wetland area, and we can see the beautiful marsh marigolds on the right that they saw there. They also took a picture of this little guy, and everyone recognized this as a tick. I think this is a wood tick. It looks very large, and so not the kind of deer ticks that we have to be worried about that carry Lyme's disease. When we go out walking, though, we usually pull our socks up over our pants and wear long sleeves, and when we get home we shower and wash our clothes. This particularly if we're in an area where there are deer, because the risk of getting Lyme's disease is quite high. So I challenged everybody how many legs they could see in the photo on the left. This insect, some people said 6, but when you look more closely you can see 12, because this is actually 2 insects on top of each other. Others had shared earlier in the discussion that they've seen insects in this position, mating, preparing to lay eggs. This creature is a 6-spotted tiger beetle. So they're on a 2-year cycle. The adults overwinter, and then they come out and mate in the spring, as these two are doing. They work the day shift and are predators on lots of pest insects during the day. The larva, so they go through 4 stages of metamorphosis, and the larva hangs vertically in a burrow with its head at the entrance and then lunges out at passing prey. So the larva also lives on insects. The other photo in this picture, I asked if people could guess what this pupal case is, and because we've seen it before, this is a gypsy moth, I think, a gypsy moth pupal case, and probably a male because there's no egg case around here. So when the females come out, they can't fly, and so they lay their eggs. They wait to be fertilized right where they come out, and then they lay an egg mass right beside the pupal case that they came out of. And we don't see one here, so I'm guessing that that a male gypsy moth came out of here. So this is a video from our apple tree in our backyard. I was so happy to see this bee day after day pollinating our blossoms to make Cortland apples, which are my favorite. You can notice how big and noisy he is, and has a shiny black abdomen. He is a Virginia carpenter bee and lives in a perfectly round burrow that he has gnawed in our fence. I was even happier, though, when Marina sent in this picture of a common eastern bumblebee collecting pollen, probably from this redbud tree. Bumblebees in Ontario are at risk, and we need to do everything we can to plant plants that they can use to help them, and also to leave patches in our garden of bare soil where they can dig their burrows. So this is a giant millipede. People recognize this because of the 2 legs attached to each body segment on each side. So these crazy creatures get to be 7 to 11 centimeters long, and they actually eat mainly leaves. They're not predators on insects, and so they're actually wonderful for creating compost in our gardens. They hide out under logs, and we should be very grateful to have them, and not try to remove them at all. So we're going to be looking at animal homes in the next few slides. And Amara sent in these pictures of a beaver having gnawed this large tree here and dug a burrow, or had denned up in this burrow on the left. And we often think of beaver just cutting down saplings and things and creating lodges, but they also do bed up in muddy burrows in banks. I think the track on the right, Amara said, was a deer track. So Sienna found this whole robin egg on the ground. It did have a crack in the bottom, probably where it fell, and the contents had leaked out, so the egg was empty, but it was whole. So we were speculating why you would find a whole egg. I mean, if you find a broken egg, then you know that the baby has hatched out of it, and somehow the eggshell has been removed from the nest. The female will remove broken shells from the nest, and she will also eat them because she uses a lot of calcium to make the eggs and will recycle the calcium. But there is another reason why an egg might appear on the ground. Cowbirds are parasites and lay their eggs in the nests of 220 different songbirds. Cowbird eggs hatch out quicker than most songbirds, and sometimes they will throw the other eggs out of the nest. It may also be, other people suggested other explanations too, that somebody could have been raiding the nest, like a weasel or a raccoon, and been intercepted by someone, by another creature, and dropped the egg. So that is possible also. So I included this picture of a nest that we saw down at Ashbridges Bay. Jim and I are helping to steward a little patch of ground in the park down there, so get rid of invasive species and recommend some cutting to the city and various things that we're going to be doing to restore a little piece of ground. And in the middle of our little patch was this red-winged blackbird nesting. We're used to seeing them nest in marshes. It is close to the water, but not in a marsh. This is in a shrub. And you can see the plastic the red-winged blackbird has incorporated into this nest. And so I was speculating what would be the effect of plastic in the nest. For one thing, it wouldn't be as, the drainage wouldn't be as good. I would think it would retain water. So when it rains, water could collect in the nest. There might be various things that would be unfortunate for the birds. So these are cliff swallows nesting down at the old nature center in Tommy Thompson Park. So it's almost worth a trip to Tommy Thompson Park just to witness this. They fly out, and they're aerial insectivores, so they fly out and catch insects on the wing and then come back to these nests that they have created. 2 years ago, the junior naturalists, when we could still visit different places, we visited Tommy Thompson Park and we watched them building these nests. So there were big mud puddles on the other side of the road, and they would fly across, grab a big lump of mud and bring it back to the nest and plop it on top of the other rows, just like building a brick wall, until they had it big enough to actually nest inside. I challenged the group whether this is a downy woodpecker, and I think some people realized it was not. And the difference is because it has this red patch that runs the entire length of the head, from the eyes down to the nape of the neck. It's sort of a telltale giveaway. So this is called a red-bellied woodpecker, and they eat mainly insects, but also seeds and nuts. They'll dig into dead field flowers for seeds. Can you actually see what this, we actually discussed what this one on the right is holding. You can see the little legs coming out from the side. It has some kind of rather large insect. Maybe I don't even think there are grasshoppers around right now of that size, but maybe even a bee, not sure. Or this could be one of the tiger beetles that we actually just looked at. So it's very important. This reminds me how important it is that we plant native shrubs and plants to encourage insects these birds can eat, and also to create the seeds that seed-eating birds will eat. So the male red belly excavates the hole in a dead tree or limb and then taps softly to attract a mate. If she accepts, she will join in excavating the hole. So you can see they've got a hole here. They must be feeding young, actually, already. So this is a wood frog, and I think some people maybe recognized it from our earlier photos from an earlier session. It sometimes starts to call when there is still ice on a pond. This is the frog that can freeze solid in the winter and then defrost and be perfectly healthy. The strange thing about this photo was that it looked very light colored to me. I'm used to seeing it much darker with a very much darker eye stripe. So I looked into this and learned that wood frogs can change their color. If it's cool weather, they will get much darker so they can absorb more sunlight and stay warm. If it's warmer, they will adopt a cooler color, lighter color, so that they reflect the heat. We visited Tommy Thompson Park this past weekend, and it's really worth a trip to see all the wildlife down there. We took this video, the whole time we were there, I could distantly hear these toads calling. It's like the low hum of a motor in the distance, and the toads all come in at different pitches. So it's quite an unmistakable sound. So after we finished bird watching in the baselands, we cycled down to the pond and discovered where they were. And this is what was going on. So this is an American toad, and I was very curious. It's cool to actually see this video and be able to study what's going on. You can see that his abdomen fills up with air first, and then sort of vibrates, and then the air seems to travel up to this pouch below his mouth. So it turns out that what he's doing is he fills up his lungs with air, pinches his nostrils and mouth shut, and then forces the air into the pouch below his chin. And as it's traveling that route, it passes over the opening to the two windpipes that go down to the lungs. And there's a piece of skin there that vibrates, and that's what actually creates the sound that he makes. And then I guess it's amplified by the pouch under his mouth. Then the interesting thing is that he doesn't exhale that air. That air goes back into his lungs and sort of gets recycled. It runs in a circle. And I guess we know that toads and frogs breathe through their skin, so it may be that he can get along with a lower level of oxygen in this air because he's actually getting oxygen through his skin. So this calling, of course, is about mating, and we did see lots of toads crawling all over each other. So Sonia and Marina saw these mink, and we had a lovely video last winter, I think, on mink. So mink are ferocious hunters, and I guess that he's hunting here for fish and crayfish and so on. These are two beautiful birds that all of us have a very good chance of seeing because they're large, and even though the leaves are starting to come out, they're brightly colored and very visible, and both of them sing beautifully too. So someone was able to identify the one on the left as the Baltimore oriole, and this is the bird that builds the suspended nest. And lots of our parks have these. Birds nest in lots of our parks. So Ashbridges Bay, where we're working, has an old Baltimore oriole nest. And again, it's a remarkable thing that they can build a nest hanging from branches that is strong enough to support the eggs and the female and the fledglings when they're the nestlings when they hatch out. So the bird on the right is the rose-breasted grosbeak. So scientists don't think too hard about creating a creative name, but the grosbeak has the big seed-eating beak. The male and the female eat all kinds of insects and berries, and it just kind of reminds me again how much we need to be planting native plants in order to make sure that our songbirds have what they need. So I challenged everyone to spot the difference between these two warblers, and everyone noticed the redstart on the right has a completely solid black head, throat, and chest and back, with bright orange under the wings and at the base of the tail. And the Blackburnian warbler on the left has the black and orange stripes and bright orange throat. So these are both stunning warblers. We've seen a lot of warblers in the last few weeks in our slideshows, thanks to Marina. And Marina was wondering, they visited the Spit, and we visited the Spit, Tommy Thompson Park, and we both noticed something, that the warblers are calling during migration. There's a virtual cacophony going on down there. The yellow warblers seem to never stop calling. We watched a black-throated blue warbler singing for probably 10 minutes. So we know that the main reason that we think of birds singing is to establish their territory. So we know that yellow warblers, the male arrives first and starts to establish his territory by singing. We know that's true for red-winged blackbirds. And then the female arrives and gets accepted or not accepted onto the territory. So males will sing at dawn often to warn other males to stay off their territory. And then they have a second type of call that they use with their mate once a pair have selected each other. They will use a different call with the mate that is quite consistent. So a lot of calling seems to have to do with breeding. So what are they doing during migration when they haven't yet reached their breeding territories? I did some research. Particularly, there's been a lot of work done on the yellow warbler, and it turns out that the yellow warbler in its wintering grounds will actually defend a territory solely for the sake of feeding itself. So I found that interesting, and the fact that they could be doing that down at Leslie Street Spit. They could be defending a feeding territory even if they're not intending to breed there. There are actually, though, many pairs that do breed at Leslie Street Spit. And another fascinating thing about birdsong is that there are dialects of songs. So birds that have grown up at Leslie Street Spit and learned the dialects for Leslie Street Spit are more likely to settle there and breed in that area. So this is another magnificent warbler with a chestnut-colored head, bright yellow throat. This is called the palm warbler. So I don't know how many different warblers we've seen in our slideshows, but I think there's about 30 different species in Ontario that pass through Toronto. Very few of them nest here, simply because there isn't enough safe forest. We have too many cats and raccoons and squirrels that can raid their nests. So they need a much more sheltered location in dense shrubbery in a more mature forest. So this is our final slide. This is a least sandpiper, and the shorebirds mostly nest on the Hudson Bay lowlands or the shore of the Arctic Ocean. So the yellow, you can see that he has yellow legs, so that helps to distinguish him from the other the other tiny little sandpipers that they call peeps. But the shorebirds are just passing through Toronto. They do not nest here, and so it's a real treat to see them.